Добрий день, вітаємо.
Good morning. Welcome to Ukraine Media Center at Ukrinform. I'm Alina Frolova, and now we are to start our briefing with Mykola Povoroznyk, First Deputy Head of Kyiv City Administration, and we'd like to discuss with Mr. Povoroznyk resumption of normal life in Kyiv, how it happens, how Kyivites are returning to the city, what are plans about recovery of the infrastructure in the city, and so on. You have the floor. Good morning. I'm glad to be with you today. This is not our first meeting. So, the city has been gradually returning to its normal way of life. The only difference is that all this is happening during the wartime, during martial law. All utilities are working for Kyiv. The whole infrastructure is operating in the city. We have managed to maintain it since the very first day of the war. It's about utilities, medical transportation, rescuers, whatever. Municipal transportation works, pharmacies, banks, petrol stations, car service stations, services, restaurants, cafes, and so on. Three bridges operate, Darnitsa, Northern and Southern Bridge are working for cars, while Metro Bridge is only for Red Line of Metro. I am to appeal to drivers again, to ask them to to yield to ambulance cars and humanitarian cars and not to take rapid transit lanes. I'd like to cover city transportation again. It was important for us when there was fortification in place, so it was difficult to move around the city also because of checkpoints installed in the city to defend and protect the city. We had to launch public transportation to a maximum extent. Also, another thing is we consider the electrical transport as the main way of transportation, since we understood the problems we would have with petrol. We forecasted those problems, so we tried to resume trolley buses and trams and metro. Now, Kyiv Trans municipal company has been operating 63 routes, more than 440 buses, 16 tram routes, about 70 trams, 25 trolleybus routes with a total of about 80 trolleybuses. Private carriers have also resumed their operation. Now they have been working in about 80 routes, and they have been using about 500 buses for those operations. On the bridges, there are 18 bus routes crossing the bridges with more than 100 buses there, and one trolleybus route with 4 trolleybuses there crossing the bridge. The metro subway operates in more or less routine mode. By now, all metro lines are working. The only thing it works is it works in the weekend mode when there are 10 to 15 minutes between the trains. All housing and utilities companies operate in normal mode, as I already mentioned in the beginning. Backyards are cleaned, waste is removed, no problem with electricity supply, water supply, and sewage. And to provide utility services, up to 3,000 employees have been working every day, and city calls on Kyivites to pay utility bills as much as possible. Those funds are used, first of all, to pay wages and salaries to those employees of utility companies and to purchase materials and resources needed to maintain services in the city. More than 700 greening in place of working. There is spring, and they see that the city is flourishing more and more. About 600 road services employees have been working every day, repairing the roads wherever possible. Unfortunately, we cannot continue development and capital repair of roads, but at least in terms of maintenance of our roads, we have to do it by point repair and partial and mid-range repair of roads. Those employees are also involved in working in the suburbs where there were heavy battles, and now infrastructure is being repaired. Also, city rescuers who have been working since the very first of the war on high alert have been involved in those work. And people from road operation units and state emergency service, they, there are those outskirts like Irpin, Bucha, and Hostomel, and those people have been working there. State emergency services officers mostly work on demining and cleaning the rubbles, and road repair units mostly work on repairing, sorting the rubbles and repairing city infrastructure in those places. Medical utilities also operate. They work under the martial law. In wartime situation, everybody who needs medical care receives that care, and Kyiv Blood Center since the very first day provides all blood components to all medical facilities. I would like to thank everybody who agreed to donate their blood, to become a blood donor. You saw our announcements. From time to time we had to stop receiving donors just to be able to process the blood, the amounts of blood already provided. It's very important that all our medical facilities were provided in due time with all blood components. The Kyiv Oncology Service Center has been working, providing all services to oncology patients. It's about diagnostics. Since the beginning of the war, we switched the heavy equipment off. Now all the radiology equipment works and treatment is provided. Chemotherapy and X-ray therapy. Chemotherapy was renewed and resumed literally in 2 weeks after the start of the war. X-ray, that's a very special equipment, but also recently we resumed it. Also there is a hotline for consultancy for patients and their families. 6 palliative care units have been working all the time providing care to those patients. Kyivites are receiving renal, dental care. Those diabetic patients receive insulin based on electronic and paper-based prescriptions. And hemodialysis didn't stop since the very first day because that's a life and death issue for those patients. We have resumed planned surgeries. There are certain restrictions, certain constraints about the medical facilities. First of all, that medical facility has to be filled up to 50%, not more than that. Then that medical facility can provide scheduled surgeries, including ophthalmology surgery, cardiac surgery, joint prosthetic surgery, and other types of surgery provided in the city of Kyiv. Also, traumatology units keep operating, and Kyivites can visit those. Prior medical and sanitary care and diagnostic and consulting centers are working, and there Kyivites can receive services from family doctors and specialized doctors. I have to say it's irrespective of whether they have a declaration signed with that family doctor or not, because we have a lot of internally displaced persons at the moment in Kyiv, and we have to provide skilled medical services to everybody who needs them. So everybody who applies to those diagnostic centers receives those services. Maternity houses didn't stop their operations. Every day new Ukrainian lives are born in those maternity wards every day. There were, probably the whole world has seen those pictures where babies were delivered in basements, but doctors have taken all precautions and cared about safety of those mothers and newborns. And during this full-scale war, 1,789 babies have been born, including 939 boys and 49 twins. Medical examination commissions have renewed their operations. Those are commissions who can diagnose or establish the category of disability, and that's important nowadays. There is online psychology and psychotherapist help working provided in Kyiv, both online and offline. We started working with people who have spent a long time in shelters, especially in metro stations, but not only in metro stations, but in all sorts of shelters where people spend time. Psychologists and psychotherapists would visit those places to talk to people, for people to relax. For online consultancy, there are more than 2,500 people who applied for help, and what is important, about 500 minors Kyiv, because we got calls from all over Ukraine. Educational services to school children are provided remotely. Their respective regulations issued by the Ministry of Science and Education, and they state that we will finish this educational year online. We tried to resume education as soon as possible. First of all, to provide education as such, and second, that mentally, psychologically, children would be able to somehow get turned back from that war. And for many of them, the school teacher is not, if not the second mother, then just a good friend. They're used to speaking with those teachers, and it provides some psychological release to them. Kindergartens in Kyiv are preparing to resume their operation, taking into account martial law. We consider opening some kindergartens in the city so that parents who work would be able to work. But I have to say that this issue is still under discussion, because we have to comply with all those requirements. First of all, safety requirements. When we bring children or many children to the same place, there should be safety and security. And the last thing I'd like to mention, because of shelling in the capital city, we have more than 200 residential buildings damaged. Also 30 kindergartens, 46 schools, and more than 70 city infrastructure facilities have been damaged. Now the city has been finishing diagnosing them, and we calculate the budgets to decide on the cost of damage and recovery of the damage. And our plans are to complete all of those works till the end of this year, including those buildings who have been damaged the most. We maintain the dialogue with the Cabinet of Ministers about getting funds allocated from the state budget, from central budget. The city will also allocate money from its budget, and we also hope for donors to help, so that we'll be able to do it in a quality way. Thank you. I will probably ask the first question, and I will give the floor to journalists. You mentioned that in Kyiv there are many internally displaced persons. Do you have any statistics about those IDPs, and are they mostly accommodated by Kyivites, by families, or city also provides some accommodation? We don't have such high concentration. Mostly those people stay with Kyivites, with their friends, with their relatives, with people they know, who provide them with some accommodation. And today it's more than 37,000 IDPs in Kyiv. Do we have some strategic inventory, strategic stock in Kyiv? We see that there are problems with fuel, with petrol, not only in Kyiv, but all over Ukraine. We understand the reasons, but have you made any conclusions? And are there any strategic reserves of key products like fuel and some basic things like medicines to provide for the city in case of any danger? I would like to answer many questions. But about this range of questions, I would like to mention that currently we have to live under different rules in a different reality, I would say. Even, when we return to Kyiv, we have to understand that now Kyiv is under martial law in a war situation, and under almost everyday danger of shelling, of strikes, air strikes. So we cannot neglect, we should not neglect the defense, we should not neglect security and safety. That's why today we still have a number of checkpoints, of roadblocks. We cannot fully resume operations of city transportation. We cannot let cars go around the city to a full scale. Speaking about fuel, now priorities have changed radically, and first of all, oil products are received by those who need them the most, who ensure defense and security for the city. The city has created proper reserves, and the municipal sector does not feel at the moment, and I hope will not feel, any problems about fuel. The same applies to foodstuffs, the same applies to first need items. Speaking about oil products, I'd like to remind you that during the first 10 days of the war, we saw very long lines waiting in food stores. Retail chains, and we altogether managed to resolve those logistical issues, and by now currently we don't have problems, and for quite a while we don't have problems anymore about foodstuffs, about first need items. Of course, maybe we are lacking such a variety of goods we were used to see before the war, but at the same time everything we need is there in stores. The same about fuel. We just need time. You just need to wait for some time for those companies, for those entities to work on their logistical mechanisms and provide fuel for Kyiv. We all understand how many oil depots have been destroyed. We all understand that railways are working in an intense way, and road transport has been working very intensely. We know what were our key sources of oil products before the war. Now some diversification is in place, and by now we have been managing to do it. And the last question, or rather two questions from me, related questions. Now most or the whole city transportation works for free. Do you plan to restore fees in city transportation? And generally, what happens to the city budget? We understand that businesses have lost their capacity. Now, do you plan any negotiations with foreign partners to support the city budget? About fees, about fares in city transport, we made it free for this time of evacuation and for the period when the city was operating in some limited way. Now we are discussing it, and we'll discuss it at the next session of Kyiv City Council. We'll discuss how to restore fares in city transportation, because the amount of the transport increases, people get back to their jobs, they need their salaries and wages to be paid, and the transport cars and trucks need spare parts and fuel, and there are electricity payments. With regard to the city budget, indeed, there is almost no money coming to a state budget. We understand that businesses in Kyiv mostly do not work. Businesses that work are mostly those servicing people in the city. At the same time, we have been trying not to limit funding to support the operation of, like we mentioned from the very beginning, operation of road transport, road repair, utilities. You know, at the moment, I don't have an answer whether from September 1 we'll get back to schools or not. We are preparing for it gradually, but at the moment, I don't have an answer to this question. Whether we will bring children to school, first-year children to school on the 1st of September. But I know that on October 15 we will need to switch heating on in the city, and we have to carry out very serious preparations for that. And that's the purposes we consider a state budget. We have lost definitely at least 1/3 of funds from the city budget, those earnings, that income of city budget, and we are talking to our partners, to Twin Cities, for them to get involved and to help the city in its everyday life and in maintaining its city services. We're not talking about developments at the moment. Dear journalists, do you have any questions?
Ready to go? Thank you very much, and Mayor. We know it's very hard. Your country is still under war, and obviously not now. And we have your Ukraine journalists ask you 4 questions. I'm asking before I think about maybe asking you 3 questions, but now I'm putting 4 questions right now for you. And first, when you're talking about the financial funding, and do you please tell me, and the funding is arrive on time from your central government to support you to running this city? The second question is, well, we've been very hard to find the statistic of the population, how many actually people continue here in your city in the residency. And I don't know, because a lot of people tell me it's maybe 2 million, 3 million people here, but we walking on the street, obviously, I don't think there's not many people here right now because people are scary. And do you have this accurate number? If you don't have, I don't mind, thank you very much, because your country is still in the war, or you might give me some roughly figures so we can estimate what's going on in the city. And the third question is, now, well, the service need this country to run in this city, have more people back to city and they need a service to obviously and to continue provide service for the city's people's life. For my personal experience, this service is not really good, because I'm looking for 4 days to get my hair cut, and well, this is bad time. Because if this kind of service you cannot improve, and how did you bring more people back to this city? Okay, my fourth question is, well, I heard about a lot of things happening in the city, and as your government, do you have any contingency to plan if, I'm saying if Russia turning back the way, come to here to attack this city again, what do your government have to do for your citizens here in Kyiv? Thank you.
Дякую.
Thank you. Speaking about payments from central government, all those subventions, all those subsidies we had to receive, especially for salaries and wages, first of all, for healthcare and for education, we received those funds in time. We don't have a problem with that. Payments from state budget for recovery of infrastructure, at the moment those funds have not been received as yet, but I hope that, you know, we have Thursday, tomorrow there will be a session, the meeting of the cabinet of ministers. We prepared all the documents. I hope that those funds will be allocated tomorrow. By now those have been allocated to 4 oblasts: Kyiv, Sumy, Chernihiv and Zhytomyr oblasts or provinces. And also last week I think funds were allocated to Kharkiv Oblast, and the next will be city of Kyiv. We are awaiting those funds to start a recovery of our destroyed infrastructure after those destroyed after airstrikes. Now, about the number of Kyivites, we mentioned this number already. It's about 2.2 million people currently in Kyiv. About the quality of services, again, I will get back to my answer about what's going on in the city. We have the martial law, we have wartime situation. We provide services, but the amount and quality of those services is at the level we can provide. For example, about 50% of employees which maintain the roads in Kyiv have not returned to their work as yet. 50%. Some of them left, some of them are at the front. They joined the armed forces of Ukraine, the territorial defense, and they perform their duties there. So currently we have focused to the maximum extent on meeting the needs to the maximum extent without compromising the defense of the city. About Russians to return, assault to return, yes, it can return. I will repeat, we do whatever we can do in the city now, not to spoil the defense of the city, for which we prepared for the first 40 days of the war. Thank you. More questions?
Okay.
Mayor, sorry, you mentioned this very important point, and the petrol. Okay, we heard about the petrol matters, a lot of trouble with our international media, and we can't go outside because we can't get a petrol. And if I can't get a petrol, I can't go outside to find the truth of what happened here. But the petrol is, please wait, I know you're very urgent, okay? So this question is very important. The petrol, I heard about somebody holding petrol in the black market, and some get some ticket or whatever. They might get a petrol, get a high price or whatever. Your government and the martial law to stick on the law to not raising petrol money to the public, because this is why somebody tell me, and this is why the petrol you can't get it, because somebody holding that petrol when waiting for you can open the market talk more realistically market price to people get a petrol. Is that true? Is that true or not? And please let me know. Thank you.
I can tell you from the city perspective, and I'll say and repeat that now for us, we have sufficient amounts for public transportation. Indeed, there is a problem with petrol. Whether this is a question of price or logistics, you know, there are entities who have to work on that issue and they're working. Now about the black market, probably somewhere there is a situation, but also, you know, the liability for that market will be according to the martial law. There are the respective responsible agencies who have to respond to this existence of the black market. I will say and repeat that the city and its utilities have been provided with fuel, with petrol to provide their services. But about the people, the population, you know, we are all moving around the city. Yes, we have to wait in some lines, but now petrol stations do sell limited amounts of petrol, and basically, on the one hand, there is no problem. On the other hand, there is a problem because you have to wait in the waiting line if you need to move around the city in your car. Yeah, you have to wait. Thank you. Thank you. Any more questions? I'm Viktor Melnikov, CGTN. Could you please tell us, you mentioned that fares in public transportation will be restored. Will that price be the same as what we had before the war, or will there be some higher ticket fare? Because when I speak with people, I see that they're worried because they think that maybe the price may change, may go up. Could you please comment on that? And maybe the city administration has some forecasts about any price increase, taking into account the shortage of fuel. The city has not made any decisions as yet to increase the transportation fares. I'd like to remind you that the city mayor made a decision at the end of last year that by the end of the heating season, until the end of the heating season, there will be no decision to be made about higher fares. Unfortunately, since the beginning of this war, not unfortunately, but anyway, since the beginning of this war, we are not to get back to this issue. There are still the same fares. Reviewing those fares, you know, live with show, we will see. Of course, for example, now we don't know anything about the cost of heating. We don't know what the price for natural gas will be during the heating season. We don't know when it will be done, how it will be done. Unfortunately, you know, life is going, life is developing, and at some point, you know, we will be faced with some choice. Either we should stop public transportation or we should increase the fare in that public transportation. So we may come to that point. I'd like to clarify, take into account that a lot of businesses dropped, salaries and wages dropped. You know, that's why nobody increases fares now. More to it, I'd like to tell you that whatever strange it may sound, but you know, there were many complaints, like it was impossible to fuel and whatever, but public transportation now is almost empty in the city. Thank you. Thank you. We have to finish. Thank you very much, Mr. Povoroznyk, and I'd like to remind you that our next briefing will be at 12:30. We'll have Andrei Gerus with us, head of Parliamentary Committee on Energy sector, and we'll be able to ask all our questions. Thank you very much.